papá se le cayeron los tacos en el bajo, en el bordón. Y la marimba que él hizo para sostenerlos a nosotros es esa que está ahí. Ya. Tiene 19 tablas, pero hizo una de 24 que la puso la marimba de los espíritus. Cuando usted llegaba y ¡pam! Le daba y eso sonaba, vea, se iba de aquí a Guapi. Allá una parte que le dicen Limones, por acá Temuey. Y desde ahí para acá mi papá se le soltaron las manos. Esa historia la...
Kindly silence all mobile devices as the program is about to begin. Intense lighting will be used during the opening show. Those with sensitivity to light should use caution. Please welcome to the stage, Hala Hana, Executive Director, MIT Solve.
Whoa, hello! Welcome! Welcome to the 8th Solve at MIT. It's so great to have you all here. This was local violinist Vivian Liu, everybody. And yeah. And right outside, we were listening to Ray Rothrock and his band up and to the right, and I saw that he recruited a new band member. I don't know if you saw that. The president of MIT herself. Ray is many things, including a Solve advisor and now a rock star, apparently. Thank you, Ray. It's really amazing to be with you all today. Whether you're a member of the Solve community and you're here with us for the 2 days of our annual meeting, or you're with us for this opening plenary and on the live stream, a very warm welcome. Our theme for this opening plenary is progress in times of crisis. Now, those who've met me know that I will bring up being from Lebanon more often than a vegan would tell you their diet. And I was reminded of this quote by Lebanese-American poet Gibran Khalil Gibran. Like me, just 100 years before, he left the shores of the Mediterranean and made Boston home. And he had this to say about progress. Progress lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing towards what will be. We are coming together in a time of crisis across the globe. We've seen escalation of violence, of destruction, of hunger, with varied repercussions and reverberations, including right here on campus. And yet, here we are, in this room, because we want progress. We want a more sustainable and equitable future for all. And the key word here is all. That's what Solve is about, to find those innovators who will make that future possible and to help them scale. Those innovators embody progress in times of crisis. For example, Solver Buildup, Nepal. Are you right here? Yay! Bjorg is being instrumental in Nepal's reconstruction after the big earthquake because of the building that were made of their bricks, which are also, by the way, climate friendly and a lot more affordable. These were the only structures that were left undamaged by the earthquake. In Haiti, Solver Laku Kaju works in a context where kids have barely gotten an uninterrupted school year in ages. And so they're providing 50,000 Haitian children lessons that don't require electricity or internet. And there are so many more. So I am going to ask for those who are able of our innovators to actually stand up, regardless of which year you are or which program. I would love, because this is about you. We have over 50 solvers and fellows and innovators with us today. They're coming from Turkey, Brazil, Cameroon, Egypt, a lot more. I'm so happy to have you here. You're the reason we do all this. All right. We've now supported at Solve 300 innovators who are having tremendous impact on their communities right now. In fact, they're touching 260 million lives. And in that way, Solve builds on MIT's ethos of innovation and entrepreneurship and leveraging technology to serve the nation and the world. But I'm going to have someone who's much better placed than me talk about MIT, and that would be the president of MIT herself. So please join me in welcoming Sally Kornbluth, president of MIT, to the Solve stage. Hi. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Hala, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Solve at MIT. So I actually had the privilege of speaking to the Solve community for the first time last spring. Some of you may know that I'm still relatively new here, about a year and a half ago. And I suspect my reason for coming to MIT and your reason for joining Solve are very much the same. A powerful desire to make an impact, to improve people's lives, and to help solve some very tough problems. Of course, the people of MIT love to solve tough problems. MIT is overflowing with ingenuity and creativity, an incredible concentration of talent and imagination. But the global challenges that we're facing are far too great in scale and complexity for only one institution, one industry, or even one country to deal with alone. We need to keep seeking new partnerships with people who can bring fresh insights, unique experience, firsthand experience, expertise of the different ways global problems play out in different countries, cities, and communities. In other words, we need all of you. I know that since its inception, Solve has been helping communities adapt to climate change and mitigate its impact. So I'd like to just take a moment to tell you a bit about our ambitious new climate plan that we've launched here at MIT. You might ask, why did we need a new climate plan? More than 25% of our faculty are already doing leading-edge climate work. But the answer is simple. It's the urgency of the climate crisis. We had to figure out how to help the talented people of MIT do more together than they could do alone, to direct their collective power to help deliver climate solutions to the world in time. So we developed a blueprint to help us organize ourselves for impact, what we call the Climate Project at MIT. Leading faculty from across the institute work together to determine the highest and hardest climate problems where MIT could make the most substantial difference. They range from decarbonizing energy and industry to empowering frontline communities to building and adapting healthy, resilient cities. There's an enormous amount to do, but as I said, this is an ambitious plan, and here's how we will know if we were succeeding. If after 10 years, MIT's work with our partners has changed the expected trajectory of global climate outcomes for the better, we will have succeeded. The word partners here is absolutely critical, because let me be clear, it's called the Climate Project at MIT, but we can only succeed with the help of strong, effective partners throughout the region, throughout the US, and throughout the world. So that's a little bit about MIT's Climate Project, and you'll be hearing much more. But the same focus on collaboration and collective power is critical to all of the global problems that we face today, including the very wide range of challenges this year's Solver teams are taking on, from fostering financial inclusion and resilience, to advancing civic education, to developing solutions for climate adaptation and safe, affordable housing, to improving healthcare access for people around the world. I want to thank you all for being part of Solve at MIT. And to our 2023 Solver teams, I have enormous admiration and respect to your dedication for taking on these complex problems and sharing your innovative solutions around the world. So for our new teams, very excited. Congratulations on your brilliant and important work. Now let's get solving.
Thank you so much, Sally, for your words, for your presence, and for your support of our work. I do feel much better about the climate crisis now that MIT is getting involved. We have an incredible lineup for you, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the most important thing that happens at Solve is meeting each other. So I want to, let's take a moment and look around you and give the folks in your proximity a wave or a smile. Collectively, we are hundreds in this room from diverse industries and backgrounds and culture, united by our desire to make progress on these global challenges. And for almost 10 years, this has been Solve's mission. We've launched over 80 challenges to find solutions to address climate change and close equity gaps in health, wealth, and learning. Our platform has 20,000 applications from 180 countries. This is like 20,000 lights in a world that sometimes can feel dark. We have selected over 400 teams, but of course, selection is just the beginning. Our mission is to help them scale their impact. And scale doesn't happen without partnership. For every success story we tell, there is someone on the other end of it, opening their door, their network, and their checkbook. Because of course, the biggest catalyst of impact remains funding. And yet, we know that capital remains too concentrated geographically, topically, and to certain types of entrepreneurs. So often, the difference between survival and death of a great solution is the risk-taking of early supporters. And our solvers tell us all the time, I was about to quit, but this recognition made me stick it out, and now I'm over the hump. I've raised 28 million, I've tripled my revenue, I've hired my first employee. That's why we're here. Solve has mobilized over 70 million in funding to innovators and helped them get ready to raise a lot more. In fact, our for-profit solvers have collectively raised over $1 billion. It's working. And so we're here together over the next 2 days, and we're here to do 3 things: to celebrate each other and the work that you do, to challenge each other and grow, and to collaborate. Each of us is a ripple, but together we can be the unstoppable wave of change. Are you ready? Yay, let's get going. To kick us off, please join me in welcoming Dr. Vanessa Carey, Director General Special Envoy for Climate and Health, World Health Organization. Vanessa.
Hi.
How are you?
Live.
My questions are right here. Vanessa, thank you for being with us today. It's really, interesting you come to this role after 20 years being focused on closing equity gaps in healthcare systems all over the world, and now you're in this first. It's the first time there is this envoy at the nexus of climate and health, which is a very good sign that we're starting to get it. But I'm interested in hearing from you, what's the most compelling part of this role? How does it all work?
First, thank you very much for having me, and thank you to all of you who are on the front lines of solving huge problems in the world, because that is ultimately what we are facing right now. And I think that is what has been exciting to be appointed this first ever Special Envoy for Climate Change and Health, because it really speaks to the recognition of the fact that the climate crisis is a health crisis. And the way that we are experiencing so much of the impacts of climate change is on our human health, whether it is directly through communicable diseases, whether it is through extreme weather events, extreme heat that is ruining our productivity, our ability to go to work, our ability to breathe, or it's indirectly, our mental health and wellness, migration, economics, and all these ways that it's hitting us. And so having the opportunity to play this role, I think that it allows us, or hopefully can help contribute to making a realization that the status quo is not working. The way we've been approaching health, the way we've been approaching our well-being, the way we've been approaching our general survival on this earth and how we're in relationship is not working. And so my hope is that we can use this to really demonstrate not only that the climate crisis is a health crisis, not only that we should not be measuring our progress just in degrees Celsius, but in actual lives saved, but to really position health as fundamental to our survival, to our well-being, and to everything that we're trying to achieve, because we're fundamentally talking about our human existence and our future. And that, I think, is the possibility of this. And it really speaks to, I think, the importance of health within this whole conversation.
Right, yeah. The planet is going to be fine without us. It's the humans on it that might not make it. And I've heard you say, and you just said it, health is the human experience of climate change. And you've mentioned, it's women, it's migrants, it's those communities that have contributed the least to climate, who are most vulnerable. I saw recently that women are 14 times more likely to suffer from the effects of climate change, not because of anything biological, but just because of the marginalization. And I'm curious to hear, if you can share a story from the front line about how those two things collide and how you've seen it play out in the communities where you do your work.
No, without question. The climate and health crisis is a personal, very human crisis. And I'll give an example from Malawi, where Seed has worked for over a decade now. So Malawi has been hit by Malawi is based in southern Africa, for those of you that don't know. It's a small country that ranks anywhere from the 6th to the 12th poorest country in the world. And it has been besieged by tropical storms that have been more intense, lasted longer, brought more rainfall, more turbulent weather, and more impact in the country. And so Cyclone Freddy, when it hit Malawi in the last couple of years, 1,000 people died, and over 500,000 people were directly impacted by the storm. It washed out bridges, it destroyed water sources, it ruined people's homes, houses, roads, access to care, access to food. And so in one district, the bridges were washed out, and it meant that the referral chain for pregnant women got broken down, literally because of the lack of infrastructure. And so a nurse midwife named Chansey Banda realized that if you're pregnant, births don't stop just because there's a tropical storm. High-risk pregnancies don't become low risk just because there's a tropical storm. And so she went to her local district office. She advocated for the fact that they had to open or make one of the district hospitals available for comprehensive and complex obstetrical care to save women and children's lives even in the wake of this. In fact, it turns out you're at higher risk of having a preterm or at-risk birth in the wake of a stress or a storm or something like that. And so the district then came to Seed and asked us to help partner with them to stand up an entirely new comprehensive obstetrical care unit, which meant that we moved a comprehensive team of nurses, midwives, obstetricians, and anesthetists to be able to increase the access to C-section. We put in equipment. We built a whole new facility. And so while the bridges and the roads were getting built to the original facilities, women were able to be referred to this new facility that got stood up, was well-staffed, and really all on the resilience of a healthcare worker that was able to identify the problem and triage what needed to happen. And not one woman or child died who delivered at that new center as a result of the ability to provide those services. And I think that what it speaks to is that we need that resilience. We need those strong health systems. And most importantly, we need a health workforce because they are on the front lines of responding to COVID, to Ebola, to cholera, to climate change, to the mental health crises. We have to be investing in this extraordinary moment with humanity, with humans who reach humans and are able to deliver that care.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I really like about that example is that it's centered in the community and in people in the community who are the best, place to understand the problem and then figure out what is the best solution for it. And maybe since you've spoken about your seed work and knowing how many innovators are in this room, and this plenary being about pushing for progress in difficult time, WHO has had a busy 4 years responding to the coronavirus. And do you see potential for some of the lessons and capabilities that were built during that fight?
Without question, COVID was a canary in the coal mine for this moment that we're in today and what we face from the impacts of climate change and health and the amount of, I think, what is coming down the pipeline. And what we learned in COVID was that, one, vulnerable communities were made more vulnerable and were left behind. We learned, two, that we do not prioritize our health and our well-being as a central function of our society, our economics, or our politics, or what we need for stable society and stable communities. And third, we have failed to really finally mount the investments in strong health systems and the workforce that fronts them. And if you start on the last point, the failure of us, we've poured billions of dollars into solving health challenges, but we've done it piecemeal, by disease, very siloed. My fund does this, your fund does this, let's hit a silver bullet and just deliver a fast and easy answer. That's not going to be fast and easy, because as we found out in COVID, over 90% of countries actually had disruptions in clinical services and health delivery services during COVID because the health system wasn't strong enough to withstand the shock and to continue delivering the services. What that means is that somebody here probably lost somebody to cancer because they didn't get diagnosed, or somebody else had a health complication that didn't get dealt with, or we missed a vaccine that makes us vulnerable to the next outbreak. We also know that our world shut down with COVID. We saw it, driven almost entirely by a desire to protect our economics, protect our national security. It wasn't motivated on a sense of shared humanity and community and protecting one another's lives. And I think in climate change, it's not going to respect borders. It's not as though greenhouse gases get to the edge of where they're burning in whatever state and say, I'm not crossing the state line, or I'm not crossing, we're connected. So we have to understand that our well-being is in this moment, and that health is central to this, and that we have to think differently and not be driven by an economic bottom line in the same way, and not be driven by just sort of, am I going to get reelected, but really think about what our long-term survival is, because that's the fight that we are in today, is our survival.
Right.
And we can either sit down and accept it, or we can figure out, and this is where I'm relying on all of you as the solvers, is we can try to figure out what are the solutions to bring in different evidence to bear to allow people to invest in the global public good, to allow people to invest in what is the moral right, but doing it in a way that everybody can understand how they benefit. And I think that is one of the challenges we face today, but a lesson that we can take from COVID without question. And I think just finally, the centrality of health is just being fundamental to everything we do.
Right.
Poor health drives migration, poor health drives, you lose your income on a household level, we lose our GDP. I think there's a very different way for us to think, and I think we have to choose that path right now.
Right. So if you had a magic wand, which one of the many, many things that need to happen would you pick?
I think we need really bold leadership right now. I think we need leadership that is willing to really have the courage to make the right decisions that are not expedient, that are not short-term, but that are really invested in kind of a new way of multilateral collaboration, a new way of a value system that is really focused on health, education, and reducing equity gaps. And I think if we start there, it will blossom a lot of the other solutions and ability. But it's going to mean checking our ego at the door. It's going to mean asking some tough questions. It's going to mean partnering across sectors. And I think being willing to give a little to gain a lot.
Right. Not able to give a lot. Well, speaking of good leaders, though, luckily we have lots of them here. We're not yet running for office, but the Solve is all about supporting this early stage innovation. And you yourself are an innovator between creating the Peace Corps for healthcare and training thousands of, as you were saying, physicians and midwives and nurses in lower resource settings, and you're now in this newly created position. Like our solvers, you're working on these big, intractable problems, and all of these will take more than our lifetime to solve. So, what lessons can you offer to our innovators looking to drive change faster?
I think number one, unfortunately, it can't take more than our lifetime to really see some strong and powerful change. We don't have that time right now. That's not pessimistic. That should be ambitious for all of us, and actually optimistic, because I guarantee you we have the wherewithal and the brain power to solve this, and a lot of it is in this room. I think my advice would be, number one, there's no ego in this. This is really about a shared experience and about how we come together to collaborate. This can't be about competition. This can't be about my idea being better than yours. This has to be about how we all rise up to bring the right solutions forward. I think that we have to remain optimistic and be willing to put in the sweat equity. You know, I've had a number of conversations with people wrestling over a really tough question, and I've had a lot of people tell me it can't be done or I'm thinking about it wrong, and I'm just going to keep talking to people until I solve what that is, right? Because if we don't solve some of these, like if this tough question is solved, I think it could be really key to unlocking things. So I think the tenacity and the perseverance matters a lot. The humility to learn. Do not be afraid of failure. I've spent so long being afraid of failure, and all it did was keep me from asking questions, keep me from learning, keep me from following my gut and my authenticity into what I think was really critically important. And the times that I did have the courage to fail were the times that led to a pathway to training 42,000 healthcare workers through Seed Global Health over the last decade, or being able to build partnerships that, you know, are unprecedented but have the possibility to train a workforce for a continent in partnership with partners that, you know, are trying to think about these problems too. Most importantly, it has given me the ability to learn every day. I have an extraordinary team that I learn from, partners that teach me all the time why I'm wrong. And by doing that, then we can make the leaps across the kind of hurdles and problems. But it's about, I think it's about hope, it's about tenacity, it's about not having a fear of failure, and it's about kindness. We've got to be kind to each other in this world today, and we've got to be generous. It will go a long, long way. And if we can hold on to that, even at a time where we're really in turmoil, and a time where we're really at war with ourselves, with each other, I think we can solve a lot of problems.
Kindness, I'm going to hold on to that. Thank you so very much. That's all the time we have.
Thank you.
But we're going to wish you luck because we need you to succeed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa.
And now, please welcome Temi Jiwa Tubasun, founder and CEO, LifeBank.
Hi, everybody. Five years ago, I was right on this stage. At that time, I was pitching an idea that I thought could really help save women across Africa. You see, let's say there's a nurse in a primary health center in Lagos, Nigeria. It's 3 a.m. This nurse has just delivered the most gorgeous little girl. A few hours later, the mom starts bleeding. This nurse is not quite sure where she's going to get the blood, the medical supplies she needs to save this mother's life. This problem is a large problem, and it exists across Africa. The lack of access to blood really causes significant amount of mortality. But it's a simple problem. So 5 years ago, my co-founder and I sat together, and we came up with this idea. And the idea is to match supply to demand. While I was pitching LifeBank at Solve in 2017, we were in 2 cities, Lagos and Abuja. We were moving just blood. Today, with the support of this incredible community, we now operate across 11 cities in Nigeria, Kenya, and Ethiopia. And we distribute, we match supply to the demand for blood, medical oxygen, medical consumables, PPE, and medical equipment. We've had incredible support and partnerships from people that are part of this community, from MSD for Mothers to Johnson & Johnson Foundation, to Skoll Foundation, and to the Gates Foundation. We've built incredible innovation using blockchain to track supplies of medical supplies and building a blood container, a blood bank in a container. Today, we serve over 96 million people and work in over 2,000 hospitals, really solving this problem. But we don't want to stop there. Our goal is to reach the 1.2 billion people across Africa who desperately need good healthcare. You see, we believe at LifeBank that primary healthcare is the foundation of a healthier society, and that a healthy society can participate in the global conversation. And we know that solving this issue is absolutely critical, and making sure that innovation can reach primary health center at the last mile. So while our innovation already works in cities across Africa, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and in Ethiopia, we are yet to get to the last mile where most of Africa get access to health. Today, I'm excited to announce our new product called OneBox. OneBox uses predictive technology to ensure that supplies get to the hands of the hospitals in last mile rural communities. The OneBox app uses historical supply data and sits on a predictive analysis to ensure that primary healthcare workers, like the nurse I mentioned earlier, are able to do a couple of things. First, imagine this nurse had updated her inventory a couple of days ago. And imagine that she tapped on the app and saw what she needed to order. And she had ordered it just 24 hours ago. And imagine that she has actually made that request and it's delivered into the hospital. In that moment at 3 a.m., she doesn't need to call anyone because what she needs is already right there at her hands. OneBox is already working in over 120 primary health centers in northern Nigeria, and we are excited to do more. This application is so simple to use. With just a few taps, you're able to update your inventory, get your prediction, and access to the supplies that you need. It's important to note that LifeBank believes that primary health center are the center of healthcare. And if we're gonna solve this global challenge that COVID has shown us, we must build technology and place this agile, accessible technology into the hands of the people who matter the most. Thank you so much, and we're just getting started.
Please welcome Desiree Plata, Associate Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering, MIT.
Today, economic growth depends on carbon dioxide emissions. Prosperous nations emit 10 times as much carbon dioxide per person per year as less prosperous nations do. And historically, the only way we've moved between these lines is through geopolitical restructuring or enormous development. We can sit here today and entertain the fantasy that coal-based energy is going away, but I can tell you that that is not the reality. In India and China, coal is critical to the individual's access to be able to develop. It's critical to their access to energy. It's critical to their access to prosperity. In order to meet their energy needs, they're reliant on coal. And furthermore, coal supports an infrastructure like the train system in India, where the subsidies from coal transport discount the rate of passenger transportation. 5 million people are directly or indirectly employed by the coal industry, and another 23 million rely on that train infrastructure to get them to work each day. What happens when that goes away? And who decides? Because of this, nations are not decarbonizing their energy infrastructure, but instead doubling down on coal. And this is the inevitability that we are faced with. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change projects that carbon dioxide emissions are going to stay high for the lifetime of everybody in this room. And in order for us to meet those 1.5 and 2 degrees centigrade targets, we not only have to revolutionize our energy systems, but also be drawing carbon dioxide equivalents out of the atmosphere. We have to do this on the order of 13 billion metric tons annually by 2050. Now that's the size of the coal industry, the natural gas industry, and the oil industry all combined. And they had 150 years to scale, and we've got to do it before this year's graduates get to their mid-career crises. Now there's two ways that coal impacts greenhouse gas emissions. The first and the biggest one are the CO2 emissions directly from the combustion of coal to generate electricity. The second is the release of methane, or CH4. This is a geologic methane source. When you open up the earth, it's released naturally. And it's an inevitability, again, that we must address. For every million molecules in the air in front of you, 2 of them are methane, and around 426 of them are CO2. Yet methane and carbon dioxide will warm the planet in equal proportion over the next 10 years. The other important distinctions that I want you to remember about these 2 greenhouse gases are that CO2 is long-lived and tends to be emitted in concentrated sources, whereas methane is short-lived and tends to be emitted in dilute fashion, even at these coal mines. Pound for pound from the point of release, carbon dioxide is a low and slow warmer. We could drop CO2 emissions to 0 today, and that would be nice, wouldn't it? But the climate doesn't feel it for 50 years. Methane, in contrast, does its damage early and then converts to CO2 in the atmosphere through natural processes. Now, if we could accelerate that conversion of methane to CO2, we would undercut methane's ability to warm the planet and change the rate of climate forcing that we experience in our lifetimes. Methane controls the rate of climate change over the next few decades. CO2 controls the absolute amount. One is a race, the other is a marathon. We need to manage both. I'm going to focus today on methane and tell you that the majority of methane emissions, over 80% of them, come from these low concentration streams. All of our traditional engineering approaches are designed for those concentrated streams. They're more economic. And I'm thankful that I'm not trained as a traditional engineer, but someone who tries to think differently about these problems. So thinking back to when I was a student in the MIT Woods Hole Oceanographic Joint Program in Oceanography, I was taught about microorganisms that live in deep ocean sediments that are able to make a living on dilute and diffuse methane in the presence of oxygen at atmospheric pressures and low temperatures. Now, these microorganisms almost universally rely on a protein that has a highly conserved crystal structure. This protein typically relies on earth-abundant metals. You're looking at copper atoms, those spheres in the middle of the structure shown here, in a nanoscopically tight pore space. That coaxes methane out of its configuration to turn into a less potent greenhouse gas. And these bacteria do this difficult to execute chemistry using these types of proteins, but we can't use them in the same ways. It would be wildly expensive for me to produce these proteins using today's technologies at the scales required. So we wanted to simulate this biochemistry with an abiotic process. If you go outside later today and scoop up a handful of dirt or dust, the chances are that you're going to be holding on to an aluminosilicate clay, or a zeolite is one type of those aluminosilicate clays. Those zeolites have that same nanoscopic pore spacing that I described earlier, and we can dope those with earth-abundant metals like copper and iron, the same magic ingredient used by the bacteria to perform that chemistry. And that gives us access to a sustainably derived, inexpensive catalyst. Now, when we first tried this chemistry at atmospheric conditions, we were surprised that we were able to destroy methane at concentrations just like the ones we're breathing right now, down to those 2 parts per million. And it even works at enriched sources, like those in the depths of coal mines and coming from the mouths of cows in dairy barns. Now, the next thing that we had to do was think about how to get this abiotic, earth-abundant material into a filtration system that could interact with the ventilation systems that are present in coal mines and dairy barns. The flow rates in these environments are on the order of 1 million cubic feet a minute. That's an astronomically high flow rate. Imagine 10 tractor trailers moving by you in 5 seconds and having to get all the methane out in an instant. That's the challenge that's on the table. We wanted to go to these environments because just like you use methane in the natural gas to heat your home and it generates a little bit of heat, coal mines have enough methane to actually drive the process itself. So we have our ventilation almost for free. We have our heat almost for free. That's carbon abatement at a very low cost. But the challenge that you can imagine, blowing 1 million cubic feet a minute through a powdered catalyst, that's going to be pretty messy. So we've spent the last few years trying to structure this material into something that can tolerate those high flow rates. Here I'm showing catalyst pellets, and here I'm showing a zeolite monolith, a honeycomb structure very similar to what's found in the catalytic converter of a combustion engine vehicle. Now, the video that you're watching is a 3D printer developed by our friends at Desktop Metals, another MIT spinout. You've heard of 3D printing for plastics. You've heard of 3D printing for metals. This is 3D printing for ceramic materials. It's a really new innovation. And this video was actually taken at a BMW manufacturing facility where the scale of 3D printing of these ceramics is the size of your car engine. And that is critically needed in order to lower the cost of these materials and be able to produce them fast enough and at a scale that can impact the levels of planetary change that we'll experience in the next 20 years. We're really excited about this development, and we're driving hard to get it into the market by 2030. If we could do this at just half of the world's coal mines, it would instantaneously stop the accumulation of methane in the atmosphere. That would allow the Earth to catch breath and recover, and maybe even start moving in the direction that we need to go. In order to realize this vision, we founded a company called MoxAir. MoxAir is devoted to methane emissions reduction, not just in coal, but in other sectors. We can abate carbon for very low rates of $5 to $15 a ton CO2, 21 kilowatt hours as opposed to 2,100 kilowatt hours per ton CO2 equivalent by competing technologies. And it could potentially remove around 500 million gigatons annually in this application alone. And that's a $12.5 billion market if you can sell those carbon credits for a mere $25 a ton CO2. That would be transformative. That would be a carbon drawdown economy. If we could get this technology deployed to reduce just half of anthropogenic methane emissions, it would save 0.5 degree warming by 2100. That's 0.5 degree of the 1.5 discussed by governments all over the world today. And so one of my favorite things about being an MIT professor is that my students ask themselves, what brings me joy? What are my talents? How can I make the world a better place for other people? I want all of you to ask yourself those same questions today and imagine what you might be able to do to lift up societies, restore the climate, and generate a carbon drawdown economy. Thank you.
And now, please welcome Ken Moore, Chief Innovation Officer, MasterCard, and Will Knight, Senior Writer, Wired.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Ken, welcome to Solve.
Thank you.
So, this is a pretty unique event, and when people think of solving the world's big problems and the various pillars of Solve, they might not immediately think of, I'm going to call it a payments company, you can tell me why it's not, but they might not immediately think of MasterCard. Tell us why they should.
Sure. So first of all, sincere thank you. I'm really excited to be in a room like this. Why MasterCard? I think there's a couple of different reasons. I think what we're trying to be and what we're trying to do as a company will speak to a lot of the solutions and the problems that you're going to talk about today. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. The second part of it is we're a very innovative company, and we've learned a lot of hard lessons in being a very innovative company. So I think there might be a part of this as well, which is what are the lessons that we've learned that will turn an idea in this room into ultimately a successful company that does some meaningful role in addressing some of the real challenges that are out there. So I think it's those two things. If I can expand on the first, the word card in MasterCard is very misleading. It is a big part of our past, and it represents a significant portion of our present, but as we go into the future, it becomes less and less. And that's not that we're backing away from cards. It's in fact that we have a huge diversity of businesses that are in identity, not just identity of people and of things, but of medicines and devices. It's also, we have large businesses in sustainability. We have businesses in ESG. We'll talk about some of those. We have businesses in cybersecurity, so protecting people from bad things happening to them. And yes, we do the payment stuff as well. So the word MasterCard itself is misleading. At its heart, what we are is a global network that connects 3 billion people, 200 governments, over 100 million merchants, and 25,000 banks and financial institutions around the world. That's what we are, and that's a little bit of why I'm here, to help find the connections that will allow us to open that up to solve some of the problems where we see synergies with this room.
Great. Okay, we can get into a bit more of that. So you run a project, the Signals project, where you're looking to the future, which is interesting for me. I try and see what's going to happen next. What do you see on the horizon that is really going to be significant, maybe especially to the people in this room?
Sure. So I'm a technologist and a psychologist by background. We'll talk about that some other time. But what really interests me, and I ground myself as a practical innovator. What does that mean? I try not to get lost in the hype and the hysteria of things, and I get very grounded in where's value really being realized. So when I kind of look out at the moment, I see, maybe 10, 12 really, in the world of commerce, the world in which I operate, I see 10 or 12 really impactful technologies, from privacy-enhancing technologies, all the different forms of AI, from traditional to generative to quantum AI. I see quantum computing, mixed reality platforms. And at its heart, actually, really what I see is technologies that are individually important but collectively come together to have an outsized impact. And sometimes solutions are not necessarily created through the application of one technology. It's really the combination of technologies. But even when you put all the technologies in place, that doesn't get it done. My experience in running one of the world's largest kind of fintech programs is that doesn't get it done. What you actually have to do, and I think this is going to be true for most of you in the room as well, is you've got to build trust in what you do, right? Technology can be used for good, it can be used for bad. So what I look for is companies that can create trust in those technologies as they address them. Because ultimately, trust is sensed by consumers, it's sensed by governments, it will eventually be regulated. But it's what gives consumers and businesses the conviction to adapt your solution, because they know you're doing it in the right way. So trust is really what I look for when I look across that broad set of technologies.
Okay, well, let's dive into, you mentioned AI, that's what I cover, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, right? Everybody is trying to do stuff with generative AI. I know you are as a company.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about what's going on there, and also, maybe you can speak a little bit to the issues around, inclusivity, equity, and how the technology stands to potentially, change the balance of power if we're not careful.
That is a big question. So there's a lot of parts to that. So how do I think about AI? Let me relate it to this room. It's easy to relate it to the corporate world, but let me relate it to this room. I think AI, let's just group all AI into the one term AI and not get hung up on machine learning versus generative. But if you take AI overall and you're a small and medium-sized enterprise, or you're a mid-market kind of, but perhaps local player, what does AI do? A couple of things. It allows you to reset your productivity baseline. What I mean by that is you've got a cost to compete today. And through the application of AI across all of your different internal functions, over time, you can reset that competitive baseline by about 10 to 20%. That is massive. That gives you the capital to invest in the new. So I think for SMEs, that's really, really important. It will not surprise you that a company like ours, we've made a commitment to financially include 1 billion people into the formal digital and financial economy, and 50 million businesses. Now, we're actually coming up on those targets already, so we're a long way there. But some of the tools, therefore, as a result, that we're building, for instance, a small and medium-sized company starting out is going to struggle to pay a CFO. They're not going to have a marketing officer. How do they tell stories, and how do they communicate on channels on which their prospective buyers are listening? They probably struggle with that. So we're building tools that use generative AI to basically create the equivalent, the co-pilots, the CFO co-pilot, the chief marketing officer co-pilot to help an SME really succeed.
Yeah, so just to zero in, those are great examples of how generative AI can help businesses and maybe improve productivity. One of the themes, one of the topics at MIT that economists like David Autor will talk about is that the impact of AI is going to depend on how we use it.
Yeah.
So you could just automate everything, but you were telling me before that you're not doing that, and maybe you can talk about why that is an important thing for companies to try.
Yeah, it's a great point. So we process about 150 billion transactions every single year, and what is the one thing that we do in that? We create trust, right? And we create trust, and our brand stands for trust. Security, interoperability, consumers are controlling what we do. And we take the same principles, the desire to create trust, into generative AI, into AI more broadly. So the reason we're not deploying tools directly out to our customers in the first instance is even though we're engineering bias out of our applications, we're reducing the hallucination factor. That's always a balance between kind of having tools that are truly usable versus tools that have the potential to hallucinate. We're putting humans at the end of every single one of those tools for now. Why? Because our brand stands for trust. We will never put that at risk. And therefore, regardless of the productivity measures, regardless of the tools, and we're building all of these tools, right? Regardless of that, we want to make sure that there's a human between us and our customer. And that's not just for this year. That will continue for the foreseeable future. And that is, think of it as the last line of defense, if you like.
Mindful of the audience here, do you want to talk a little bit about the carbon calculator?
Yeah, one of the things that I was so personally invested in doing is we carry ESG targets in MasterCard as well. And at the more senior levels, they directly correlate to how we get paid. So we really believe that, for financial and digital inclusivity to work, it's got to work for everyone. So we've put that into play in the company. We've put targets in against it. And we talk about them publicly, and our pay varies depending on how we do against those. So we've targets around sustainability, targets around inclusivity, targets around diversity, and we publicize all those things. So that's like doing well, but doing good. Like, we mean what we say. It's really central in the company. But where that led us is, what do we have? We see people's payments history, right? So we understand what people have bought. So we set out some time ago in a room just like this, where we discovered a company called Economy. They're in the Nordics, in Europe. And what they did is carbon calculation on goods and services. So they could tell you that an Adidas top was likely made in whatever country it was made, and you've bought it in a certain country. I know that because I can see the purchase history. And how did it get from there to there? And they can calculate the carbon footprint of that item. So we said, okay, that's a really if we want to bend the arc of consumerism, because we know consumers care about causes, if we want to give them more information to help them make a different choice, how could we work with Economy to build something? So we built what's called the carbon calculator. We deployed it to all of our banks through an API. It's live in, I don't know how many countries, 20, 30, 40 countries at this stage, where we educate consumers and we wrap up their payments history, typically monthly, to say, here's the effect on the planet of what you bought over the last month. And then we said, okay, we've educated them, maybe they make a different choice as a result, but sometimes you just got to buy the bananas or the coffee or the whatever, but you really feel bad about that. And we said, okay, how can we go further? So how can we offset it? So we created Priceless Planet Coalition, which is a way of saying that's your carbon footprint. Here's ways that you can, rather than taking a loyalty point from your bank or your credit card company or the brand that you bought something from, instead, why don't you offset your carbon impact on the planet? So planting trees, doing other things. So we reinvented loyalty to do that, and that's now live all around the world. And we hope to get about 100 million trees in the next very small number of years. Again, we're a very, very long way towards that. And it's not to harp on that one solution. I listened to your guests earlier on very intently. It's the combination of effect of a million ideas like that, connecting with the power of a network like ours across the number of countries that we have. That's what's really going to bend the arc of all of these really, really difficult challenges. So that's why I thought I would share that example. It's in the hope of discovering the next one.
Okay, great. And you know the audience here, and I know you're keen to connect with people and network. Given your position, you know, you have this amazing visibility of commerce, and you look, you know, a bunch of future gazing yourself. What kind of advice would you give entrepreneurs here, given especially their interests?
Sure. So we run the world's largest kind of incubator for kind of scale-up companies, right? And we find them all around the world. And maybe the most common problem that I see, particularly in earlier stage companies, and therefore my words of advice to you would be, fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. I think if you fall in love with the problem, you will invest into really deeply understanding it, and it is more likely that you will understand the reasons why a particular solution has to be created. Too many people have an esoteric view of the problem, right? And then create a solution, and it becomes all about the solution. So, and a lot of companies fail. Really well-intentioned companies fail because of that. But fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. And for the problems that you're trying to address, those problems are actually probably expressed across an ecosystem. You're probably not going to directly address the end problem yourself. You may, and that's fantastic, but you may have to work through partners in the middle who also have a different view of the problem, right? And I think that's the one piece of advice I would give, is too many startups, really well-intentioned, fail because they quickly latch onto a solution. They fall in love with that rather than falling in love with the problem, which would allow them to pivot as they discover net new things.
Right. And I mean, if there's something you've heard here that makes you think you'd like to work with, can we give people permission to connect with you on
absolutely,
LinkedIn?
absolutely. I'm up in Boston frequently. I do some work with the other guys down the road. Please don't hate me for that. I meant what I said. My reason for wanting to be here is we are partner orientated. We realized that my dad told me years ago, and I realized lately that he's right on so many things, and that hurts me to say. But he said, no matter who you are, the smartest people work for somebody else. I really like that. And it's a reason why I'm in a room like this. There's a lot of very, very smart people here. When you understand the challenges and the problems, and you feel that our network effect can be helpful at the right point in time in your business, come talk to us, come find us. So hit me up on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest channel to find me, and I'd love to chat.
Okay, great. Well, we're out of time. Thanks very much, Ken. Please join me in giving a round of applause. All right, thanks. Great job.
Please welcome Jessica Hicklin, Chief Technology Officer, Unlocked Labs.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hicklin, CTO and co-founder at Unlock Labs. Unlock Labs is a tech nonprofit focused on a better justice system built from the inside out. You know, if you had asked me 3 years ago if I could imagine myself being on stage at Solve, I'd have said no, because I was still in prison. At 16, I went to prison on a life without parole sentence. Locked away in the Potosi Correctional Center, Missouri's death row prison, I had no access to formal education. Even after a landmark Supreme Court case gave me the opportunity to come home, I left prison after 26 years without a single formal education experience. Unfortunately, this part of my story is the norm. In the United States, 3 out of 5 incarcerated adults are functionally illiterate. 7 out of 10 do not have a high school diploma. And less than 6% have access to higher education. As an unsurprising result, 83% of those released from prison will be rearrested within 10 years. This does not have to be a reality. Research shows that by investing in access to education, we could nearly eliminate the likelihood of rearrest. You know, I've lived this problem firsthand. When I was incarcerated, I was so frustrated by my lack of access to education that I took matters into my own hands. I taught myself to code without the internet, and with my peers, built Unlock Ed. Unlock Ed is an innovative, open-source digital education platform designed specifically for corrections environments, with a focus on making corrections evidence-based and data-driven. Now, if you're like me, the first time I heard the phrase evidence-based, data-driven corrections, I said, that sounds really neat. What in the heck does that mean? So let's see if I can make it a little more concrete. Mo is one of our current platform users in Sing Sing Prison. Like Mo, I've had many opportunities to talk to him. Because Unlock Ed is available to Mo, we've been able to increase his access to education and rehabilitation programs. While Mo participates in those programs, Unlock Ed is gathering data that can be used to intelligently decarcerate him by properly implementing parole and earned credit release laws. As Mo returns to his community, Unlock Ed's data can be correlated with his success so that we can figure out what programs actually supported his successful return. And more importantly to Mo himself, when he goes to future employers, he'll have a comprehensive record of his achievements that he can provide to say, I am skilled and employable, I'm ready to join the workforce. This is our model. We take justice-impacted technologists like Corey, seen here. We train, empower, and employ them. You know, they've lived closest to the problem, and now, in partnership with industry experts on our team, they're part of the solution. Unlock Ed is stable, deployed in the field, and actively supporting 3,000 incarcerated learners. We're on track over the next year to reach 10,000. More importantly, with more than 20 states as thought partners, we're well on our way to building a national education infrastructure for prisons. Unlock Labs is more than just a tech nonprofit, though. We are a community looking to build a better world for all. Now, with the help of Solve, our community has gotten a little bigger. Today, I'm going to ask you guys to join the Unlock Labs community. And together, let's build a better justice system from the inside out. Thank you.
Please welcome LeJune Montgomery Tabron, President and CEO, W.K. Kellogg Foundation, and Kate Warren, EVP and Executive Editor, DevEx.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be at my first Solve. I believe this is your first Solve, too.
This is mine as
right,
well.
This is great. Been really inspiring conversations so far. So something that struck me is several of the speakers before have been talking about how we really need to do systemic, drastic change to approach the challenges that are ahead of us. And I want to talk a little bit about Kellogg Foundation's theory of change. So you work with children and families in many parts of the world, including Illinois, Hawaii, Brazil, different indigenous communities, Haiti, Kenya, Sierra Leone, list goes on. And you have a theory of change that really focuses on long-term investment, community-driven solutions, and really focusing on the root causes of inequity. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you see that theory of change really leading to more sustained equitable progress.
Absolutely, and you are correct. When we think about our theory of change, I would add to what you've said is that we believe solutions reside within communities. People have the capacity to improve their own lives, and what we're doing is fueling their innovation and their creativity. We do believe that it is long-term, and that if we can address the systemic structures that actually perpetuate inequality and disparity, that not only will we improve the lives of some children, but we will improve the lives of more children. So our theory is about looking at the systems that are broken, that don't work for everyone, and trying to innovate and create new systems that are equitable, that allow every child to thrive.
And do you have any examples you can share of that in practice?
I do. Recently, we launched what we called our Racial Equity 2030 campaign. And what we were looking for is great, innovative, and actionable solutions from all over the world to the most disparate structures that we see in our society today, and thinking about where are the ideas and the best innovations to dismantle these systems and make them work. So we sent out a call. We got over 1,400 applications from all over the world, over 70 countries, and we selected the top 5. And these ideas are looking at some of the most problematic systems and structures that we encounter. The first of the 5 was about creating an anti-racist education system for the entire country of Brazil. Another example was looking at indigenous land rights and creating law and practices that would allow indigenous people to preserve their land. One on environmental justice, teaching people in communities how to advocate for their own rights as it relates to environmental justice. One was about, in Chicago, working with young people to address issues of healing and social justice by themselves, young people leading and taking the action. And then finally, in Hawaii, addressing youth incarceration and actually seeking to eliminate youth incarceration completely. So those were our 5 finalists, really bold solutions, and what we wanted to do was scale these innovations and then hopefully replicate them. But we invested $90 million in total, $80 million for these top 5 finalists, and we hope by 2030 that these issues will have solutions that we are pursuing greatly, and in some cases they will be totally erased.
Well, what I love about your approach is this focus on the long-term investment, and we heard Vanessa Carey earlier talking about how critical that is, and you've made a generational commitment to places like the Yucatan and Haiti, and when you give grants to your grantees, you're often doing like 8-year grants, which in the world of philanthropy, where it's often 1, 2, maybe 3 years, that's a pretty unique model. So I'd love to hear about why you are choosing to invest in that way, what benefits you see from that, but then also how you think about building lasting sustainable systems that can still thrive even when your funding is no longer there.
Absolutely, and we always think about sustainability, but we learned a lot from our grantees, and we know that if they're spending half their year fundraising, and if they don't know how they're going to be sustained as they pursue these very complex problems, that we're not getting the best of our organizations. They have issues with staffing. These are real organizations, and they're operating on very limited resources. So we want to be the fuel that keeps them moving and keeps them going. And so, one, when we go into a community, when we name them a priority place, we say it's for a generation, because we don't want communities to think, how long is this philanthropy going to be here? Because that's not, that's insecurity, and in some ways we want to be the partner in community. We want them to know that we're going to be there, and that we want to be a thought partner, not only a funder, but someone that cares deeply about the community. And whenever we name a priority place, we name national people from the place to lead the work. So we're trying to work alongside our grantee partners and our communities. So that's the issue of the generational commitment. It's about trust building, and we know that in this work you have to build trust. And then finally, on the issue of sustainability, the way we work is all about sustainability. Our DNA is really focused on building leadership, so we look and support great leadership in communities, which we heard is desperately needed these days. We also look for community engagement, because we know that sustainability happens within the leaders and within the people in the community. And then finally, as we mentioned earlier, we look at issues of racial equity and we support racial healing, because at the end of the day, we really have to break down these barriers and these systems that perpetuate inequality. And we have to focus, as you mentioned, on the root cause of those. And the leaders in the community and the people in the community have the agency and the passion and the resolve to take down these systems once they understand how they perpetuate inequality.
So speaking of leadership, you've been, I think you celebrate 37 years with Kellogg, 10 years as CEO, so
Yes.
amazing, congratulations.
Thank you.
So when you look back in that sweep of time that you've been there, I think right now it feels very dire, right? It feels like everything's going wrong. It's a little scary, it's a little overwhelming. I would love to hear kind of how you think about that and putting it in context of the work you've been doing over these years. Do you feel like we are really at an unprecedented moment? And if so, how is that adapting your leadership style? But also maybe, are there some things out there that are happening? I think we talked a little bit about these opportunities and spots of hope out there that maybe is not quite as dire as often the headlines portray it to be.
Right. So, you know, almost 4 decades in one institution is an interesting journey that I've been on. And part of my hope comes from the transformation that I've encountered within the organization that I now lead. Over these decades, our focus has been, how do you practice what you preach? And our own organization had to take a journey around how do we build community from within to give us the credibility to then build community throughout the world. So our organization went from, when I arrived there in 1987, not a very diverse organization, pretty traditional structures that maybe weren't serving everyone. And over this time, we've transformed ourselves from the inside out. I became the first African-American woman leader in the organization, and that was part of the journey. And we've continued to think about what it actually takes to lead this work with authenticity. And part of that has been, you know, my own journey and how I think organizations and leaders need to take the lead and actually have a vision about what the future could be. Yeah. And, you know, that's your second part of the question, what gives me hope? One, I have hope because we've done it. We've seen it. And we've seen this transformation all over the world as we encounter our work in communities. And today, what I think about is I get inspired by the backlash we're seeing right now, because I believe we must be showing promise and showing progress, or no one would really care to try to tear us down and prevent us from the continuous momentum that we have right now. So I get inspired by the challenges before us, but I do believe we are continuing to identify great innovation and ways to make sure at the end of the day that every child and every family has an opportunity to thrive. And we have to create these opportunities in order for our nation and the world to thrive. And we're seeing the connection and seeing allies show up who understand that this is our shared fate.
And so you have, you released a tool that kind of charts out, gives a roadmap for leaders on how to navigate all kinds of scenarios, climate crisis, growing conflict, and growing division, generative AI, all these things that are changing. So I'd love to just maybe give us a few highlights from that roadmap. What would you like to see in 10 years? What are a few things that excite you about that plan?
Yes, thank you. And we partnered with the Institute for the Future, and we've created what we call this, the map of the future. And we call it Lighting Up the Future for Children. And the way we derived this map was through a listening process where we listened all over the world, across all of our grantee populations. We had one-on-one convenings, we had virtual convenings, but at the end of the day, we listened to them and we taught them practices of forecasting and future thinking, right? And then from all of this work, they they identified what they think were the signals for the future that we should be aware of today that should help guide our work. And one example, one that I really appreciate, was called systemic othering. And so now we know that our structures and our systems don't serve everyone. And think about systems being created with that same bias, but with the speed of technology. And where now we have disparities, that could be amplified just through technology. The biases would create, and more people would have health outcomes that are not equitable, education outcomes that are not equitable, et cetera. So, that's what they call, a signal of what we should be thinking about as we think about the future. So then I get really excited about some work that's already happening to reverse that trend. And we have a grantee that's working on what they call a local voices network, where we are allowing people to share stories and connect so that people are not, through technology, dehumanized. And instead, they're learning stories from others and creating empathy around what others may experience that they may not have the context to understand. So, to think you can use AI for good and begin to build the anecdote for some of the systemic bias that may be created in the future.
Well, I love your tip to practice what you preach, and so hopefully everyone in the room is doing that in the work they do. But Lejun, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Please welcome His Excellency Saeed Al-Nazari, Secretary General, Great Arab Mines.
Hello.
I can do a little thing here. So nice to see you, Excellency.
Nice to see you.
Thank you so much. So I want to talk to you about your Great Arab Mines, which I was really excited to learn about for our conversation. And this is really your mission to invest in intellectual capital, finding these great, brilliant minds out there in the Arab region that can really help push and propel social progress. And you've had a career that is focused on developing, recognizing, and supporting leaders. So I'd love to hear just more about how come you are pursuing this leadership approach to really solving some of the social challenges we're discussing today.
I think if we gamify what MIT Solve is working on, and somehow if we meant to design a survival game where we solve the world's biggest challenges, the ideal location for that would be the Middle East. Living in a region filled with conflicts over the past 200 years, continuous conflicts, instability, harsh weather, many different opinions on what is a social progress. Your ultimate solution is, your survival solution is to actually build leaders and build characters that can turn this day-to-day problems and day-to-day challenges into solutions. We in the Middle East, that is our day-to-day business, how to turn challenges into solutions. And one aspect is to basically how to lift up the whole generation to look at hope and believe in hope, that they can actually design a better future for themselves, their families, and their communities. And one way to do so is by role models. Looking at the Arab world in terms of history, going back hundreds of years ago, you will find every single Arab proud of his history, of the depth of advancements in science and engineering and medicine, algebra, al-Khwarizmi, the names of most of the stars in the sky. The advancements in medicine, the advancements in engineering, the advancements in the technology we use today, many goes back to the years where we call the golden age of the Arab world, where we had people like Al-Khwarizmi and many others invent and explore and research about many scientific contributions. Yes, we are proud of that era of our history, but then we shouldn't be stuck there. What we need the most currently is to actually have more living role models. One thing you would notice many people in many areas in the whole world sadly goes into is that we value people when it's a bit too late, when we lose people, when we somehow recognize that their contributions, their research, their advancement was worthy to recognize. It's hard to design memorials, it's hard to write articles, it's hard to do research when we had the opportunity to recognize them when they were alive and around us in our communities. That's something we want to make sure that we do that homework of recognition. And that's why we have the Great Arab Minds, to actually celebrate our living great minds in physics, in chemistry, in science, in engineering, in technology, and have them as the brightest and the most visible role models to generations to come.
And how do you think about leveraging these great minds from all the different backgrounds you just described to really be able to lead in a moment of crisis and to help build resilience in communities, whether it's in the Arab region or globally? How are you thinking about connecting those leaders to being able to solve some of these problems?
So the first step is actually to ensure that they are not hidden gems anymore in our societies. We ensure we turn them into the most visible gems. If you look at numbers worldwide, and I have conducted many surveys with young people on how many role models they can name in physics, in chemistry, in engineering, in technology, in arts and design, very limited. Sometimes maybe they are either too busy or too humble to be too visible for our young people, but one thing or one step to start with is to introduce young people to these role models, to show them what is possible. We need a compass to tell them what is the ideal scenario if you explore this sort of fields. Who are your role model? Who is your next version of who you are currently? And that's how we have started. We asked universities, we asked communities in the whole Arab world to actually nominate people to be part of the Great Arab Minds community. Within 1 year time, we have the biggest ever database of nominees in the Arab world. These people are philosophers, these people are authors, entrepreneurs, innovators. We created a network where they can actually work together. We created a network where we made science hot again. We wanted to make sure that as much as we have people who desire to be entrepreneurs, we have also people who desire to be researchers. Last January, it was the first time we award the first batch of winners in the Great Arab Minds Award. And the winner of the engineering and technology category was an associate professor here at MIT, Fadl Adib. Fadl Adib, born in Lebanon, studied for his final exams, sometimes in the basement, scared from some of the civil wars they were witnessing at that time in Lebanon, made it to be one of the most successful graduates at American University in Beirut and then at MIT. He's among the youngest tenured professor at MIT. He worked on a wireless research and technology that allow people to actually know what happens behind these walls using Wi-Fi signals. His research is used by the world's biggest corporations. Last year, if you ask young people about Fadl Adib, they wouldn't even know him, or wouldn't even know their research, or wouldn't even know in a way where they can work together. Today, if you go and meet many researchers in Lebanon or in the Arab world in general, they would want to be the next Fadl Adib. And that's the impact and the power of this award. And that's just a one-year time.
Yeah, so thinking about this youth engagement, and in the Arab world, it's about 60% of the population is under 30. We look at the African continent, 70%. So there's a lot of opportunity with youth coming up. And engaging them with these potential mentors, but also how you're thinking about mobilizing these young minds to be those future mentors and those future leaders, or leaders now. So how are you thinking about that in building this pipeline of people that can help add to the great minds that you are curating?
So working with young people and with leaders who work with young people worldwide, I have noticed that there are two lenses to look at the sector. There are some people who looks at youth from a problematic point of view, where they look at unemployment rates, they look at housing challenges, they look at how do we actually manage their energy and so on. And then you have the other perspective, where we look at young people as the solution. They are the solution to climate change, to economy, and to stability in general, and also they are the most valuable asset. And I think in the United Arab Emirates, we have a case study in working with young people that ultimately showed its results within a couple of years. In the United Arab Emirates, we have over 6 ministers in the cabinet who are under the age of 38. Almost in every single board of directors in the United Arab Emirates, the government had allocated a seat for young people under the age of 35. We have the Ministry of Youth hiring young people to actually solve their challenges. I think the equation works very well when you give young people trust, authority, and then the challenges to get busy to solve. The equation is a win-win case every time. The issue, it looks very simple, but then how many governments do you see around the world that would trust to hire a young person as a minister, as an undersecretary, as a board member? I can assure you that's among 5 or 10 governments worldwide.
So in our remaining seconds together, we have a lot of leaders in the room in different stages of their leadership journey. What would be your one quick piece of advice for them on how they can think about some of the lessons you've learned on supporting these leaders that they can bring to their own leadership style?
Maybe I would highlight one point that a great mentor once told me. He spent some time with Nelson Mandela. And he told me, you know what's special about Nelson Mandela? It is his shining eyes. It is the spark in his eyes. The spark that tells you right away when you look at him in his eyes that he is capable of changing the whole world. That he believes with passion in whatever he's doing and in the vision that he has for himself and for his community. And working with many leaders in the region and worldwide, I noticed that the most successful leaders are the people who have that spark in their eyes, that they have a deep belief that they can actually turn their dreams into reality. And to simplify what leadership is, I think the moment you change people's life, the moment you lift up people, and the moment you invest in them and help them find their capabilities, their possibilities, is the moment you would easily notice that spark in their eyes. And if you manage to do that, and if you manage to look at yourself every morning with a belief that you can lift up your community, that you can turn your purpose into reality, it's the moment that you will see also that spark in yourself. Every morning, I look at my 2-year-old daughter, Shemma, at her eyes, asking myself, who is the person I want to become? To make sure I see that eyes shining with joy, passion, and hope. And if we ask ourselves what would make that special person in your life proud, and you turn that spark on, as I think it will be the ultimate guide on what we should work on and what we should accomplish as leaders and as young leaders and as growing leaders.
Great. Well, I think that excellent advice to end on, to find your spark. But thank you so much, Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Welcome, Simon Mejia, music producer, visual artist, and environmentalist. Bomba Estéreo.
Hello everyone. Good evening. My name is Simon Mejia. I'm a music producer and visual artist, and I'm also a father. So yes, I'm concerned about what's happening today in the planet as with society. I created a very popular band back in 2005 called Bomba Estéreo. We even made music with Will Smith, so it's really popular. It sounds funny today, but it's really popular. I toured the world for more than 10 years, but after the pandemic, I decided to stop touring. But I will tell you later why. I come from Colombia. That is this beautiful and tragic country at the same time. Why tragic? Because we lived under violence and war throughout all of our history. And as we're seeing today, war is the terrible thing of humanity. And if we want to start solving things, we have to, first of all, stop war. Second, stop listening to politicians. And third, start listening to innovators, you guys, and to indigenous leaders, and to the students protesting outside as well. So back to the positive, Colombia. Colombia, really beautiful and amazing country. We have all of the ecosystems of the planet in this small territory, all of the ecosystems of the planet. We have, as you guys, both the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. We have the Andean mountain range. We have two amazing jungles, the Pacific rainforest and the Amazon jungle, and we have the plains. We are full of birds, #1 country in diversity of birds in the world. We're full of water, and we're full of jungles. But best of all, we have one of the greatest music in the world. That it's not reggaeton, as you guys may think, Because yes, we have lots of gold, so that's maybe we have also that kind of music, but it's the ancient traditional Afro-Indigenous music from Colombia that has been happening for centuries and is played by ethnic minorities in Colombia. And it sounds more or less like this. I'll give you some small examples. That's number one. I have to stop because I don't have so much time. So this music I came to realize very late in my career that is a music that has inspired not only me but Bomba Stereo and many artists all around the world and in Colombia of course, and it's a music that is inspired by Colombia's great biodiversity, by the sound of the jungles, by the sound of the rivers, by the sound of birds, and by the sound and those connections with the spiritual beliefs of those ancient indigenous communities. And also as an environmentalist, I discovered that my industry, the music industry, had a huge impact on nature, huge impact on nature. So that's what basically took me off touring, because as always, the data is impressive. Data in the era of streaming, impressive data in an era of heavy touring and planes all over the skies, and in an era of massive festival attending. So I decided to get off the touring plane because yes, touring maybe was funnier in the 80s, but today is not so fun. So I decided to stop and start walking the talking. Because yes, guys, if music dies, if nature dies, music dies. If nature dies, music dies. But we should not give it all to artists, because in the industry, in the music industry, there are lots of other industries involved as well that have to take responsibility as well in this big problem. The transportation industry, the food industry, the energy providers industry, even the streaming industry have to take responsibility and can start making a greener and taking a greener path in the music business. But I decided to walk the talk, take action, and during the pandemic, I started a musical project that is called Monte, that translates to jungle in Colombia. That is also a place where in Colombia have happened all the major revolutions, including this indigenous revolution of connecting with nature. And Monte is all about using the sounds of nature to make music. Because I think one of the major, or the root of this big environmental problem we're into today is that we humans lost connection with nature. And maybe through sound, there's a way of reconnecting with nature. So that's my small piece of action, and Monte, more or less, sounds like this.
Los errores normalmente son huesos de la humanidad.
Thank you. So that's a 2-minute sample of what I've been doing for the last 4 years. Yeah, so music, sound, isn't enough today. We need action. We need action, guys. Action, action, action. Because this climate crisis that we call, we should not see it as a crisis. As one of my big influencers says, Brian Eno, we should see it as a climate opportunity for change. Climate opportunity for change. So I joined the Earth Percent initiative, which is basically an initiative of the music industry giving back to the planet. And how does it work? Us artists give 1% of our musical revenue back to the oldest and newest artist of all, that is the Earth, that is nature. That thanks to this initiative, nature is now officially an artist in Spotify and all streaming platforms. All streaming platforms. So, 1% sounds pretty symbolic, right? But sum up all the 1% in an ideal world, all the 1% of all artists of the world, if they join this kind of initiatives. For example, only in Spotify, there are 11 million artists. So 1% of each one of those artists is a lot of money that goes through this initiative to projects that are working on field towards climate change, greener the music industry, environmental justice, conservation. So some of my catalog in Monte is under this, and this is my latest release under this model, a Bomba Stereo remix that I did that is features nature, and you guys can go and check on Spotify. And with every click, we're giving back to the earth, and you guys are giving back to the earth. So it's a really clever solution of changing the world using the power of technology to give back to the earth. Action, action, guys. And following this line of action, I found it also during the pandemic that I had plenty of time to found and think about things. An impact production company that is called Monte Jungla, translate to jungle, jungle. And it's made up of a diverse group of people. 2 of them are sitting here, my wife, who is an industrial engineer and administrator, and Dave, who actually lives here in Boston. He's an educator and social impact leader. So we have an office in Boston if you guys want to reach out. And there's John in Mexico and Lorena back in Colombia and me. And we basically started doing short documentary, environmental and musical films. These both two are on YouTube. You guys can check. They are directly linked to actions in the communities, in the territories of Colombia. And now we're focused on 2 feature-length documentaries that will be released in 2025. One about the Magdalena River of Colombia, that is the origin of all this amazing music that I was playing at the beginning. And the other one that is called The Shape of the Trees, that is about 3 environmental Colombian female leaders that live in a country that kills environmental leaders on a daily basis. These 2 documentaries are going to be linked to 2 very beautiful impact campaigns that will work with the communities involved in the films towards education process, cultural and artistic process, and conservation of their territories. And because yes, after walking all this path and walking the talking, I'm truly convinced that today we need to impact first and then entertain, not the opposite. Entertainment should be a celebration of an achieved impact, not the opposite. Music and film reserves is our big dream, finally, at Montejungla, is to create a series of conservation reserves, conservation natural reserves in Colombia, financed through a kind of earth% model, through local film and music and festival industries in Colombia that finance natural reserves that will protect not only thousands of hectares of pristine forest and water fountains, but that also will be a way of leveling the carbon footprint of all those industries in Colombia, film, music, and festival industries in Colombia, can be a way of giving job opportunities to communities in the territories, avoiding them to go to the conflict and to war. And finally, that can be a great place for visitors, local and international, to be inspired by the greatest of all, that is nature. So this, guys, is my perspective on how arts, entertainment, film, and music can help on this climate crisis. That, remember, we should not call it a climate crisis, but a climate opportunity for change. Thank you very much. This is my social media where you reach out. If you want to know more about, I'll be happy to tell you after the session. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
And now, please welcome back to the stage, Hala Hana, Executive Director, MIT Solve.
Thank you, Simon. Can you think of a better way to respond to crisis than with art and music? I think artists have this way of making us question our reality and look through the keyhole for what's next. The issues we've discussed, we're facing can be as stubborn as racial inequity, as devastating as war, as all-encompassing as climate. But we wanted to show some leaders who are here driving progress despite the unpredictability of the crises. And whether from the vantage point of the big institutions that they represent, or also as our solvers and early-stage innovators. What are we going to do next? For those of you who have been with us for this public plenary, thank you so much for being here. We loved having you with us. And for the rest of you, this is just the beginning. We had too much fun, so we're running a little bit late. So we can just, get going, get out there, and start, rolling up our sleeves. The brain trusts are really fun way to get to know the entrepreneurs, give them advice, and and for those of you who want to work with us, there are so many ways to do so. Whether launching a prize, supporting programs that maximize impact, directly investing in our solvers. So I want to, thank the many amazing sponsors who make this work possible. And I'm going to leave you to it. Thank you so much. I'll see you out there. Thank you.